Emily Martinez stepped back from her front door, paintbrush still in hand, and felt a surge of satisfaction wash over her. The bold crimson color, Benjamin Moore's Caliente, practically pulsed with life against the conservative gray exterior of her colonial-style home. After 3 months of living in Pleasant Valley's cookie-cutter conformity, she had finally added her signature to the canvas. The morning sun caught the still wet paint, making it gleam like a jewel in a setting of beige and top houses that lined Meadowbrook Lane. Emily checked her watch, 10:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, and wondered how long it would take for the HOA's self-appointed color police to notice. Her neighbor across the street, Mrs. Peterson, had already peeked through her blinds 4 times since Emily started painting at 8. As a professional artist whose work hung in galleries across the city, Emily had agonized over the exact shade for weeks. She considered safer options, burgundy, perhaps, or a deep mahogany that might pass as an earth tone under the HOA's draconian guidelines. But something in her rebelled against the bland uniformity that Pleasant Valley's board president, Diane Holbrook, enforced with almost religious zeal. The sound of a car door slamming drew Emily's attention. Barbara Wilson from 2 doors down was power walking toward her, designer athletic wear perfectly coordinated, her face set in what Emily had come to think of as the HOA tattletale expression. "Emily, dear," Barbara called out, her voice syrupy sweet. "I couldn't help but notice your creative choice." She gestured at the door as if it were a crime scene. "Did you get approval from the Architectural Review Committee? I'm just concerned because you know how they are about following proper procedures." Emily wiped her hands on her paint-splattered jeans, leaving crimson streaks that matched her door. "The RC guidelines say they have to respond to requests within 30 days. It's been 45 since I submitted my application. According to Section 8.2 of the bylaws, that constitutes tacit approval." Barbara's perfectly maintained smile flickered. Emily had done her homework, spending countless hours studying the 127-page community guidelines document. She'd highlighted, annotated, and found every loophole she could, a necessity in a neighborhood where residents had been fined for crimes ranging from unapproved mailbox numbers to having grass that was too green compared to their neighbors. "Well," Barbara sniffed, already pulling out her phone, "I'm sure Diane will want to review that interpretation." As if summoned by her name, a black Mercedes SUV turned onto their street, moving at the stately pace Diane Holbrook used for her thrice-daily neighborhood inspections. Emily could practically feel the board president's blood pressure spike as the red door came into view. The SUV stopped abruptly in front of Emily's house. Diane emerged, pearls gleaming and blonde hair perfectly coiffed, flanked by 2 other board members who appeared like supporting actors in a community theater production of Desperate Housewives. They wielded tablets displaying the community guidelines like holy texts. "That's not an approved color," Diane announced, her voice carrying across the manicured lawn with practiced authority. "Section 4.32 clearly states all exterior doors must be painted in earth tones from our approved palette. You have 72 hours to repaint it, or will be forced to issue a fine of $100 per day." Emily met Diane's gaze steadily. "Actually," she said, pulling out her own copy of the guidelines, its pages bristling with sticky notes, "I'd love to discuss the definition of earth tones. Did you know that red ochre was one of the first pigments ever used by humans? You can find it in cave paintings dating back 30,000 years. Quite literally, it's the most natural earth tone in human history." Diane's face flushed a shade remarkably similar to Emily's door. Later that evening, as the sunset painted the sky in defiant shades of red that would never pass HOA approval, Emily sat on her front porch nursing a glass of wine. She watched as her neighbors performed their carefully choreographed evening routines. Garbage bins whisked away exactly at 6 p.m., children called indoors as if on cue, and automatic sprinklers activating in perfect synchronization. A soft cough drew her attention to the adjacent property. James Chen, her elderly neighbor, stood at the edge of his immaculately maintained lawn. Unlike the other residents who had been openly gawking at her door all day, James's expression held something different. a glimmer of amusement and what looked suspiciously like approval. "Beautiful shade of red," he remarked casually, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "Reminds me of the doors in Shanghai's old quarter." He glanced around conspiratorially before adding, "Would you care to join me for coffee? I have something you might find interesting." 20 minutes later, Emily found herself in James's home office, a room that seemed to belong in a different universe from Pleasant Valley's sterile aesthetic. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves housed leather-bound law volumes, and the walls were adorned with framed newspaper clippings chronicling landmark civil rights cases. A sleek laptop sat amid organized chaos, stacks of manila folders, post-it notes, and legal pads covered in precise handwriting. "I've been waiting for someone like you," James said, pulling out a chair for her. Someone who wouldn't just roll over when Diane and her cronies started their usual intimidation tactics. He reached for a particularly thick folder labeled Pleasant Valley HOA Violations, Pattern and Practice. As a retired civil rights lawyer with 40 years of experience, James had been methodically documenting the HOA's activities since moving to Pleasant Valley 3 years ago. He spread photographs across his desk like a detective mapping out a conspiracy. "Look at these," he said, pointing to images of various homes. The Thompsons' Christmas lights, approved despite being clearly over the lumens limit. The Paddles' application for the exact same display, denied. The Rodriguez family's religious door decoration, cited for a violation. The Williams' oversized cross wreath, mysteriously acceptable. Emily leaned forward, studying the evidence of selective enforcement. "They're plain favorites," she murmured, recognizing the pattern. "It's worse than that," James replied, opening his laptop to reveal a spreadsheet. "I've tracked every fine issued in the past 36 months. Notice anything about which homeowners get immediate violations versus warning notices." The data told a story that made Emily's stomach turn. Newer residents, particularly minorities and young families, received significantly more violations and higher fines than established residents who were friendly with the board. "But here's what really interests me," James continued, pulling out a document marked Financial Audit. "Have you ever wondered why our HOA fees are triple the rate of similar communities? Or why the board insisted on using that overpriced construction company for the clubhouse renovation?" As James laid out the evidence of possible financial impropriety, Emily felt a mix of anger and excitement building. Her red door wasn't just an act of rebellion anymore. It was the thread that might unravel the whole tapestry of corruption. "The question is," James said, leaning back in his chair with a knowing smile, "are you ready to take this fight beyond your front door? Because I've been building a case, and what I need now is someone brave enough to be the face of it." Emily thought of Diane's smug expression, of all the neighbors who had been silently suffering under the HOA's tyranny. She squared her shoulders and met James's gaze. "Where do we start?" Sophia Martinez had inherited her mother's artistic eye and her father's knack for spotting a good story. The 16-year-old honors student sat cross-legged on her bed, editing footage from her hidden camera setup with practiced precision. The video opened with Diane Holbrook, the HOA president herself, actually measuring the height of Mrs. Johnson's decorative garden gnome with a tape measure at 6:30 a.m. "This is going to break TikTok," Sophia muttered, adding text overlays that highlighted the absurdity of the situation. Her previous video of the board members photographing garbage bins had already garnered 50,000 views, but this one felt different. There was something especially ridiculous about a grown woman skulking around someone's garden at dawn, fighting crime one ceramic gnome at a time. The notification sound from her phone interrupted her editing flow. Her latest post about her mom's red door had just hit 100,000 views. The comments section was exploding. "HOA Karen strikes again. Wait until they hear about the Fair Housing Act. My HOA tried this too. We need to stand together. #Red Door Rebellion." Sophia smiled, remembering how her mother had initially resisted her social media campaign. "Mom, trust me," she had insisted. "This isn't just about our door anymore. This is about every homeowner who's ever felt powerless against these petty tyrants." A knock at her bedroom door made her jump. Emily poked her head in, her expression a mix of concern and curiosity. "Honey, have you seen the local news?" Sophia quickly pulled up the Channel 7 website on her laptop. There it was, front and center. Pleasant Valley HOA controversy goes viral. Local teen exposes pattern of harassment. The article featured screenshots from her TikToks, including the now famous clip of board member Karen Watson measuring grass height with a ruler during a rainstorm. "They want to interview us," Emily said, sitting down beside her daughter. "James thinks it could help the case, but I wanted to check with you first. Are you ready for that kind of attention?" Before Sophia could answer, her phone buzzed with a notification. Someone had posted security camera footage from the community pool, showing Diane's granddaughter breaking the no running rule repeatedly, while other children were being cited for violations. The hashtag #HOA was trending locally. "Mom, look at this," Sophia said, scrolling through messages from other teens in HOA communities across the country. They're all sharing similar stories. The Thompsons kids from number 47 just sent me footage of the board measuring their basketball hoop height 3 times in one day. And Jamie from Oak Creek sent documentation of their HOA trying to ban all pride flags as unapproved decorations. Emily watched as her daughter navigated through the growing digital movement she'd inadvertently sparked. The battle over their red door had transformed into something bigger. A generational clash between old guard control and modern transparency, playing out in real time across social media platforms. The best part. Sophia continued, pulling up a spreadsheet she'd created. "I've been tracking every violation notice in the neighborhood for the past month. The timestamps on these notices are interesting. Most of them are issued during school hours, which means Diane and her friends are spending their days looking for violations instead of working," Emily finished, understanding dawning on her face. "Have you shown this to James?" Sophia nodded, a mischievous glint in her eye. "He said it's exactly the kind of pattern evidence he needs. But wait until you see what I'm posting tomorrow. I've got drone footage of board members' homes showing at least 7 violations of their own rules. Apparently, the rules don't apply to everyone equally." Emily hugged her daughter, equal parts proud and amazed at how their personal stand against HOA overreach had evolved into a full-fledged digital revolution. "Just remember," she cautioned, "with great power comes great responsibility." "Mom," Sophia rolled her eyes, "that's from Spider-Man. This is way more serious. This is HOA TikTok warfare." James Chen's dining room table had disappeared beneath a sea of documents. Emily sat beside him, surrounded by 8 years' worth of board meeting minutes, while Sophia perched on a kitchen stool, updating her spreadsheet of violations. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across stacks of financial records that painted a disturbing picture of Pleasant Valley's governance. "Look at this," James said, sliding a document dated 3 years ago across the table. The board approved a $50,000 expenditure for landscape enhancement without any competitive bidding. He pulled out another paper. The contract went to Green Dreams LLC, a company owned by Diane's brother-in-law. Emily picked up the contract, scanning the signatures. But according to the bylaws, any expenditure over $25,000 requires 3 competitive bids and a homeowner vote. "Exactly," James nodded, adjusting his reading glasses. "And here's where it gets interesting." He opened his laptop, pulling up a folder labeled Unofficial Meetings. For the past 4 years, the board has been holding what they call planning sessions at Diane's house. No minutes, no homeowner notification, no oversight. But look at the dates. Sophia leaned over, her TikTok temporarily forgotten. Every major decision in the official minutes was made 2 days after these planning sessions. It's a shadow government, Emily realized, connecting the dots. They make the real decisions in private, then rubber stamp them at official meetings. James pulled out another document, this one showing a series of bank transfers. "Remember last year's special assessment for the clubhouse renovation? $2,000 per household for urgent structural repairs." He spread out photographs of the clubhouse. "I had a friend in construction examine the work. At most, it should have cost a third of what we paid." The doorbell rang, interrupting their investigation. Through the window, they could see Mrs. Rodriguez from the end of the street, clutching a manila envelope. James let her in, and she rushed to the table, her face flushed with excitement. "I found something," she announced, pulling out a stack of papers. "My husband works at the county records office. These are the original Pleasant Valley covenants from 1985. She pointed to a crucial paragraph. "Look at Article VII. All amendments to community guidelines must be approved by a 2/3 majority vote of homeowners." Emily's eyes widened. "But the board has been changing rules without any votes. The door color restrictions, the garden gnome ban, the holiday decoration limitations. None of it's legally binding," James finished, a smile spreading across his face. "They've been enforcing rules they had no authority to create." Sophia was already typing furiously on her laptop. The HOA's official website only shows the amended guidelines from 2021. They varied the original covenants. "There's more," Mrs. Rodriguez continued. "I pulled all the board election records. Diane has been president for 8 years, but according to the original covenants, board members are limited to 2 two-year terms." James began sorting the documents into evidence categories, his legal mind already building a case. Pattern of financial misconduct, violation of open meeting laws, unauthorized rule changes, term limit violations. He looked up at Emily. "Your red door didn't just crack open their facade. It's bringing down the whole house of cards." The sound of car doors slamming outside drew their attention. Through the window, they could see 3 board members marching toward James's house, tablets in hand, presumably to issue another violation notice. "Perfect timing," Sophia grinned, holding up her phone to record. "I think it's time we had a conversation about those unofficial meetings." Emily stood up, straightening her shoulders. "No more hiding in the shadows," she declared. "Let's see how they handle everything being brought into the light." James gathered the most damning documents into a neat pile. "Remember," he said quietly, "we're not just fighting for a red door anymore. We're fighting for every homeowner who's been bullied and every rule that's been twisted to serve their power." The doorbell rang again, more insistently this time. The Pleasant Valley Community Center hadn't seen this many residents in attendance since the contentious Great Grass Height debate of 2022. Every folding chair was occupied, with people standing 3 deep along the walls. The air conditioning strained against the heat of too many bodies and rising tensions. Bill Thompson, a retired architect whose modern bird feeder design had earned him 12 violation notices, stood at the podium with a laser pointer and a stack of professionally prepared presentation slides. His silver hair caught the fluorescent light as he addressed the crowd. "Property values aren't just about conformity," he explained, clicking to a graph showing real estate trends. "Look at Riverside Heights just 3 miles away. They allow personalized exterior designs within reasonable guidelines. Their average home values have increased 12% more than ours over the past 5 years." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Diane Holbrook, sitting in her usual front row seat, shifted uncomfortably as her main argument began to crumble. Maria Rodriguez, the local real estate agent who discovered the original covenants, stepped up next. She brought 3 pending contracts for Pleasant Valley homes that had fallen through in the past month. These buyers specifically cited the HOA's reputation as their reason for withdrawing, she revealed, her voice steady despite Diane's glare. "One couple called us the neighborhood where fun goes to die. Is that really the brand we want?" From the back of the room, Mr. Paddle stood up. "Last month, they fined me for hanging traditional Diwali lights, called them excessive holiday decorations. But the Andersons' Christmas display, which could probably be seen from space, got a special mention in the community newsletter." More residents began sharing their stories, each one building on the last. The widow who'd been fined for planting sunflowers in memory of her husband. The veteran ordered to remove his small flag garden. The young family penalized for their children's temporary chalk art on their own driveway. Emily watched from her seat beside James as the dam of fear and silence broke. Sophia, recording everything on her phone, leaned over to whisper, "This is better than any reality show." Then Helen Schmidt, who lived in Pleasant Valley since its founding, slowly made her way to the microphone. The room fell silent. Ellen had served on the original HOA board in 1985 and was known for her encyclopedic memory of community history. "I helped write those original covenants," she said, her voice wavering but clear. "We wanted to create a community where people could take pride in their homes while being good neighbors. Somewhere along the way, that vision got twisted into this." She gestured at Diane and her board members, this dystopian micromanagement. The room erupted in applause. James stood up next, carrying his folder of evidence. "We have documented proof of unauthorized rule changes, financial irregularities, and selective enforcement," he announced. "But more importantly, we have a chance to restore this community to what it was meant to be." Emily stepped forward then, pulling out her own presentation. She created a series of architectural renderings showing how personalized touches like her red door could coexist beautifully with community standards. "We're not asking for chaos," she explained as images of tasteful modifications appeared on the screen. "We're asking for the freedom to make our houses feel like homes." The energy in the room had shifted. Where there had once been resignation and fear, there was now determination and hope. Diane's attempts to interject were met with firm requests to wait her turn. As the meeting continued, residents began forming committees, one for bylaw revision, another for financial audit, a third for architectural guidelines reform. The revolution that had started with a red door was becoming a full-fledged community restoration. "Remember," James addressed the crowd, "change doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen when people stand together." Sophia, still recording, smiled as she added the perfect hashtag to her latest post, #Pleasant Valley Rises. The law offices of Chen, Martinez and Associates existed only on paper, but its headquarters, James Chen's perfectly organized home office, was buzzing with activity. Emily sat at a makeshift desk that had appeared in the corner 3 days ago, reviewing depositions, while Sophia managed their growing social media presence from the window seat. "They're trying to settle," James announced, hanging up his phone. He removed his reading glasses and rubbed his temples. Diane's lawyer offered to drop all pending fines and review the color restrictions if we agree to withdraw the lawsuit. Emily looked up from a stack of financial records. "And let them keep their positions. After everything we found." The evidence had grown more damning by the day. What had started as a dispute over a red door had uncovered years of financial mismanagement and abuse of power. Their lawsuit now included $180,000 in unexplained administrative fees, contract steering to board members' relatives, selective enforcement based on personal relationships, violation of open meeting laws, unauthorized rule changes without homeowner votes. "Look at this," Sophia called from her perch, turning her laptop around. Someone leaked emails between Diane and the other board members. They were keeping an actual blacklist of homeowners who questioned their decisions. The emails showed board members coordinating targeted enforcement against specific residents who had spoken up at meetings or filed complaints. The Paddles Diwali lights violation, the Rodriguez family's religious decoration citation, all carefully planned acts of retaliation. A knock at the door interrupted their review. Maria Rodriguez entered, carrying a USB drive. "The county assessor's office just digitized their records from the past decade," she said, excitement clear in her voice. "You won't believe what I found about the clubhouse renovation." They gathered around James's computer as Maria pulled up the files. The documents showed that the $400,000 renovation project had been split into smaller contracts to avoid triggering the competitive bidding requirement. Each contract had gone to companies connected to board members or their families. "Classic contract splitting," James muttered, taking notes. "That's not just an HOA violation, it's fraud." Emily's phone buzzed with a news alert. The local NBC affiliate had picked up their story, complete with drone footage of board members' properties showing multiple violations of the same rules they'd been enforcing on others. "They want to interview us tomorrow," Emily said, scanning the email. "The reporter's especially interested in the financial aspects." "Perfect timing," James replied, pulling out a thick folder. Because I just finished reviewing the original incorporation documents. Pleasant Valley was set up as a nonprofit community association. That means they're required to file annual reports with detailed financial disclosures. Want to guess how many years they've actually filed? Before anyone could answer, Sophia's phone chimed with an urgent alert. She pulled up her TikTok to find dozens of messages from other Pleasant Valley teens. "They're shredding documents," she announced, showing them a video of lights on in the HOA office at 9 p.m. "Karen Watson's daughter just sent this to me. They've been there for hours." James straightened in his chair, suddenly alert. "That's destruction of evidence. We need to act now." He reached for his phone. "I have a judge who owes me a favor. We can have an emergency injunction within the hour." Emily looked at the growing mountain of evidence around them, then at the determined faces of their impromptu legal team. What had started as her small act of defiance had exposed a system of corruption that had controlled their community for years. "Send that settlement offer back with our response," she told James firmly. "They can keep their deal. We're going to see this through to the end." Sophia was already crafting the perfect hashtag. Hashtag no settlement, hashtag justice for Pleasant Valley. The Pleasant Valley HOA office had never seen this many cameras. Local news vans lined the street, their satellite dishes reaching toward the cloudy morning sky like mechanical sunflowers. Inside, the emergency board meeting was about to begin, with every seat filled and residents spilling into the hallway. Diane Holbrook sat at the center of the board table, her usual pearl necklace conspicuously absent, her fingers nervously tapping a stack of papers. The confidence that had once radiated from her like a force field had crumbled in the face of mounting evidence. "Before we begin," James Chen announced, standing at the podium, "I'd like to enter into record the results of our forensic audit." He placed a thick binder on the table. This document details 8 years of financial irregularities, including but not limited to. The room fell silent as he began reading. $47,000 in landscaping contracts awarded to Green Dreams LLC, owned by board member Watson's brother-in-law. $180,000 in undocumented administrative fees collected from violation notices. $400,000 clubhouse renovation split into multiple contracts to avoid homeowner oversight. Each revelation landed like a hammer blow. Residents who had suffered under years of petty tyranny watched as their suspicions were confirmed in devastating detail. Furthermore, James continued, "We have evidence of systematic discrimination in rule enforcement." He nodded to Sophia, who projected a series of charts onto the wall. The data was undeniable, showing how new residents, minorities, and those who questioned board decisions received significantly more violations than others. Mrs. Rodriguez stood up, her voice shaking with controlled anger. 3 years ago, you fined me $500 for my Virgin Mary statue, calling it an unauthorized lawn ornament. Yet board member Peterson's collection of garden gnomes somehow met guidelines. More residents began speaking up, years of frustration pouring out. My daughter's graduation celebration was shut down for noise violations at 7 p.m. You denied my solar panel application 3 times without explanation. My children's chalk drawings earned us a fine, but the board president's grandkids. Emily watched from her seat as the carefully maintained facade of Pleasant Valley's leadership crumbled in real time. Local news reporters scribbled frantically in their notebooks as each new accusation emerged. Then Helen Schmidt, the original board member from 1985, slowly made her way to the microphone. The room hushed. Even Diane looked up. "I've lived here for 40 years, Helen began, her voice firm despite her age. "We founded this community on principles of neighborliness and reasonable oversight. What you've done," she looked directly at Diane, "is turn our dream into a nightmare of power abuse and personal gain." Diane finally stood, her face flushed. "Everything we did was for property values. We maintained standards. We protected. You protected nothing." Emily interrupted, stepping forward. She held up a printout of recent home sales. "Property values in comparable neighborhoods with less restrictive HOAs have outperformed ours by 12%. Your protection was nothing but control for control's sake." The sound of police radios crackled from the hallway. 2 officers entered, accompanied by a man in a suit who introduced himself as a representative from the district attorney's office. In light of the evidence of financial misconduct and discriminatory practices, he announced, "Our office is opening a formal investigation into the Pleasant Valley Homeowners Association Board." Sophia, still recording everything, caught the exact moment Diane realized it was over. The former HOA president's shoulders slumped as she watched her carefully constructed kingdom crumble under the weight of justice and transparency. As the meeting descended into controlled chaos, Emily glanced out the window at her red door in the distance, the small act of defiance that had sparked a revolution. Sometimes, she realized, the biggest changes start with the smallest stands. 1 year later, Emily stood in front of her red door, sipping morning coffee and admiring the transformed landscape of Pleasant Valley. The changes were subtle but significant. Solar panels gleamed on the Rodriguez family's roof, the Paddles garden bloomed with traditional Indian flowers, and children's laughter echoed from yards that once earned violations for excessive recreational activity. The community newsletter in her hand, now edited by a rotating committee of residents, featured a photo spread of the neighborhood's doors. Red, blue, green, and even a stunning purple graced its pages, each one telling its own story of personal expression within tasteful bounds. "Mom," Sophia called from inside, "you're going to be late for the board meeting." Emily smiled at the irony. After the dust settled and the criminal investigations concluded, she'd been elected to the new HOA board, a position she'd never imagined holding. The transition hadn't been easy. Diane and 3 other board members faced charges for financial misconduct, while Karen Watson had turned state's evidence, providing detailed records of their years of malfeasance in exchange for leniency. James Chen, now the board's legal advisor, waited by his mailbox, ready for the big vote. He asked as she approached. Today, they would finalize Pleasant Valley's completely revised community guidelines, a document that had taken months of community input and careful consideration to craft. The community center buzzed with positive energy, a stark contrast to the tense atmosphere of the previous regime. Residents chatted amicably, sharing stories and pastries at the monthly coffee with the board session that preceded official meetings. "I have something to show you," Maria Rodriguez said, pulling Emily aside. She opened her tablet to display the latest real estate statistics. Property values had risen 15% since the changes began, outperforming every other neighborhood in the county. Turns out, people want to live in a community that balances standards with personal freedom. Who knew? The meeting began with a presentation from Bill Thompson's Architectural Review Committee. Their new guidelines emphasized harmony over uniformity, sustainability over conformity. Solar panels were now explicitly permitted, rain gardens encouraged, and native plant landscaping celebrated. "We're not just changing rules," Emily addressed the gathered residents. "We're changing the culture of our community." Last month, when the Hendersons needed help repainting their house, 15 neighbors showed up with brushes and ladders. That's what an HOA should be about, supporting each other, not policing each other. Helen Schmidt, who had become something of a community elder stateswoman, stood to share her perspective. "In 40 years, I've never seen Pleasant Valley more pleasant," she quipped, earning warm laughter from the crowd. The final vote on the new guidelines was unanimous. The document included robust protections against future abuse, term limits for board members, transparent financial reporting requirements, and a clear appeals process for all decisions. As residents filed out after the meeting, Emily noticed a moving truck at the end of the street. The newest family to join Pleasant Valley was arriving. She watched as 2 young children ran excitedly up their new driveway, their parents following with boxes. Sophia, who had been documenting the community's transformation for her now viral social media accounts, joined her mother. "Look," she said, pointing to their new neighbor's door. They had painted it a bright, cheerful yellow. "Should we go welcome them?" Emily asked, knowing the answer. "Already on it," Sophia grinned, holding up a welcome basket. I included a copy of the new guidelines and an invitation to next week's community barbecue. Also, they followed our Instagram page. They chose Pleasant Valley because of our story. Emily looked around at her transformed community, at the diverse doors, the personal touches, the neighbors chatting on front porches, and felt a deep satisfaction. The Great Paint War had ended, but its legacy would live on in every color that now brightened their streets and in every newcomer who chose their community not despite its differences, but because of them. And her red door, it had become something of a local landmark. New residents often took photos in front of it, calling it the door that changed everything.